Hello and welcome to the Womb-Centered Healing Podcast. I'm Sama Morningstar, and in the Womb-Centered Healing Temple, we have a couple of wonderful groups in which we have ongoing conversations between womb-centered healing practitioners around various topics. And today's topic is in response to one of the temple members who was asking about womb alchemy in relationships, how our womb power in an awakened womb process or awakening womb process is activated in sexual relationship with a partner and in our relationship practices and behaviors in day-to-day life, not only when we're having sexual intercourse or sexual activity, but also in our daily lives together, in our relationships, and all the different aspects of relationship. And so I thought I would share today in the podcast about my experiences with that and invite the conversation. So you can send me a message if you're listening to this in whatever platform that you're listening. You can send me a message through that platform. I know YouTube has comments. You can comment below if you have experience of this that you would like to share. If you're listening on Anchor, you can send me a message through Anchor about this, and I can use your message in a subsequent podcast if you give me permission to do so. You can also join one of the temple groups, either on Facebook, the Womb-Centered Healing Temple group, and we'll be discussing it there. You can also join the Womb-Centered Healing Temple group on Mighty Networks, which is an alternative to Facebook that doesn't have some of the drawbacks on Facebook that many of the Womb Temple members have run into, like censorship and insufficient privacy measures and things like that. So if you want to try out an alternate platform that's not owned by a big corporation like Facebook, try out Mighty Networks and look for us at the Womb-Centered Healing Temple portion in the Mighty Networks website community. So the topic for today is womb alchemy in relationships. And there are a number of aspects of this that I want to share about. One that I'm particularly involved in right now is ancestral healing. So our wombs carry ancestral experiences and wisdom from back through the generations, and also carry that forward through our descendants, whether we have babies or not. That feels like there's a womb transmission that goes forward through the generations. As we become more awakened to our womb power, that becomes more the case, that there is this transmission from the past to us and into the future. And so I like to describe it as an energetic umbilical cord that travels back through the generations to my mother, my grandmother, my great-grandmother, my great-great-grandmother, and on and on and on, and forward. Now, I haven't had any children and don't plan to, but I feel that energetic umbilical cord goes forward to the collective descendants through my work, through my creative endeavors that are like my children. So that passes forward, as well as I've activated my womb alchemy to transmit through that energetic umbilical cord these ideas, creations, recreations, rememberings of our womb wisdom and everything that I create and give of myself really comes through the womb. The visions that I'm in service to in my work and in my life are being created through my womb power in the world and transmitted to future generations. So this is part of womb alchemy in relationship, because when we come together in sacred union in our sexuality, particularly as women in our wombs, we receive the energy of the people that we are sexually engaged with. So in whatever kind of sexual union we may be having, those of us who have physical uteruses and wombs, and those of us, even if we don't have physical uteruses, if we don't have a physical uterus, we can still activate that womb power within us and receive during sexual union with a partner that we're in relationship with. We connect with that energy, that ancestral energy. And that connection can be consciously made and engaged with in our womb alchemy. So this can happen whether it's a heterosexual relationship or another configuration between whatever genders are relating sexually with each other, as if we are, and it can happen unconsciously. And that's part of the bond of sexual relationships, that it can become troublesome to people if they've been having sexual relations with different people and aren't aware of this ancestral bond that's created through our sexuality, or maybe they're aware of it but aren't paying attention to it. That can be troublesome, and it can be part of why when people move on from a relationship, that there may be residue from that prior relationship and maybe making it difficult to move on, or when people are repeating similar undesirable relationship patterns, that can be part of, unconscious personal ancestral patterns, but it could be tangled up with past relationship patterns where that ancestral bond was created but was not completed or released, and that bond may still be there and intertangling with any future relationships that the person might be wanting to create or to have or to nourish. And so having an awareness and a consciousness of this ancestral bond feels quite important for having clear, healthy sexual relationships, sacred union relationships. And so when we consciously engage with that, then we can support each other in our ancestral healing process. And so what that looks like at a very basic level is simply the awareness that each of us is the answer to our ancestors' prayers. So any suffering that took place in our ancestral lineage, there were likely prayers that went on, pleadings with the universe in whatever form that took during that time of suffering. And that got passed down through our cellular memory, along with the ancestral suffering that took place, as well as any wisdom that arose out of that suffering, coping mechanisms, perhaps wise or unwise, however they may be, as well as actually wise ways and strengths that were developed to get through whatever suffering took place. And so we all inherit all of those aspects of our ancestry in our cellular memory, and particularly in our womb space, because that is where that cellular memory is designed to be passed on, to be shared, to come into union with that of another being. And so even if we're not making a baby in our sexual union, we are exchanging lots of other energies, and that ancestral umbilical cord is coming together, and there's alchemy that occurs, especially in sexual unions that are not focused on creating a baby. And so when we consciously engage with that, we can activate healing intentions in our sexual union, especially around this ancestral inheritance that we all have, and anything else, anything from this lifetime, which I actually consider to be ancestral inheritance too. We're all our own ancestors, our younger selves, our antecedents to who we are now. And so that moment of sexual union, those moments of sexual union and sexual exploration, and the pleasure that we cultivate in our lives with that, and the activation of our womb spaces, it can be a potent healing process for that when we consciously engage with healing intentions and creative intentions. And we can do that together if both partners are interested in doing that. We can do that in lots of different ways. So, for example, with my partner and myself, we have explored doing that in many different ways, sometimes speaking out loud, conscious intentions, sometimes simply coming together for our own comfort and healing, in just coming together in our union, that is the overarching intention of our union, of coming together to be a comfort and healing resource for each other. And having that be the case in every aspect of our lives, that is our overarching intention, that we're providing comfort and wisdom and support for each other in every aspect of our lives. And when the suffering from our past or our ancestry becomes something that needs our attention, because we may be struggling with recurring behavioral patterns or energetic patterns, emotional patterns that continue to cause us suffering, then that activated womb alchemy that is in our sexual union and in our sacred union, our life union, that helps to both bring those issues up, sometimes quite large and loud, and also helps bring the medicine, the wisdom from our ancestry, the wisdom that we're developing as we develop as humans, and our spiritual wisdom as we develop our practices, all comes together as we meet those moments that need healing together. So there can be various doorways into that. And the sexual union is part of that and participates in that. And that womb space activation, it's all part of the same process. And I call it the cauldron of relationship. So relationship itself is like a womb that births, births and rebirths itself. And so the relationship itself is something that we create together, and the quality of the relationship is something that we create together. And we bring all of our ancestral content, and then it transforms in that cauldron. So that's one form of the alchemy, or that's sort of an overarching view of the womb alchemy in relationship. And there's various ways that this alchemy comes about and takes place. And one of the ways that I work with is a very deeply feminine, womb-centered way of being in relationship and alchemizing the energetics between my partner and I, which is to plant deep-seated intentions in my womb space and simply let that be there in the darkness and the mystery of the timing and the rhythms of the womb, and simply nourish my own womb space on an ongoing basis, more and more so, to the best of my ability, and continually nourishing that space more and more through my womb nourishing practices. And the more I'm nourished and replenished and well rested, the more my natural womb alchemy just takes place without me having to do anything, effortlessly and easily. And pretty soon that seed of desire of whatever it is that I want to create in my relationship with my husband, in our lives together, comes into fruition. And it's through a partnership. You know, I can say, share that desire with my husband. Usually I share it one time. He can be all for it. He could be completely resistant to it, not interested in it at all. But if I've planted that seed of desire, if that desire is truly rooted in my womb guidance, my womb wisdom, there will come a time and the gestation period of it being in the dark is varied on these things, but there will come a time when suddenly my husband's all about it, and it's happening, and it's doing it, right? And I didn't insist on it. I didn't talk to him about it a whole bunch of times. I didn't do any of that. It just started happening when the time was right. I can list many, 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 many things that have happened this way in our relationship. And it's very powerful. Now, people might listen to this and say, oh, I'm encouraging women to remain silent and not speak up about what they want. If you remember, I said at the beginning that I will usually express my desire. I can give an example. A while ago, I was having the feeling that I wanted to get some kind of solar power. We don't own our own home. We live in a rental. It's a very good rental. We've possibly considered purchasing our own home, but there's a formula that you calculate your rental and the price of the home and whether or not it's actually worth it to buy a new home given the rental you have. And we haven't found a purchasing option that makes it worth giving up our rental. So at one point I was really feeling this desire and the wisdom in investing in some sort of solar power setup that would work at our rental. And I was looking into the options and I was showing them to my husband, and he wasn't feeling it. It wasn't the time yet. We didn't necessarily have the resources available to make that big of an investment. So I planted that desire deep inside my womb, and there were plenty of other things to work on towards that end. There were many things to work on towards that end that I could just work on my own, and that we worked on together, that weren't directly working on that, but on aspects that were preparatory for that. And I didn't necessarily think of all those things as preparations towards that, but that's what was happening. And just recently, we were discussing, especially with our neighbors who are also renting in this apartment complex, the fact that our local power company, in response to the fact that the weather conditions and that some of the fires recently have been, in combination with the weather conditions, have been caused by under-maintained electric boxes and electric lines, poles, and things that the company hasn't been able to keep up with maintaining. And under the weather conditions that we have, high winds and a lot of heat in the summertime, those under-maintained electric lines and boxes have been the culprit in devastating wildfires in where we live. And so the electric company's response to this, I'm sure, and I hope, I need to look into that more, I hope that they are doing as much of the maintenance as they can to get everything safe and secure. But until that is the case, what they're doing is having rolling blackouts where they're shutting off the power when the weather conditions are risky for some kind of power equipment failure, and which would result in causing a fire. So last summer we'd have a day here or a day there with no power, but it wouldn't last more than 12 hours. This summer, the news is that there may be power outages for numerous days in a row at a time. And so we were all discussing this and how we might prevent what happened last year, which was even in a 12-hour power outage, things in the freezer were defrosting and like that. So we're looking at all the different options, and they were talking about a gas generator and this and that. My husband has maintained and worked with gas generators, and he doesn't want to do that again. So he got in there and was looking all up on these solar power generators. And I looked up a few, I just looked up one because he was talking about the gas generator. And I'm like, honey, let's look at the solar power generators. There's new technology being developed all the time. And I started looking it up, and I was talking to somebody on a website who was going to design a specific system for us. And he got all into the one that he was looking into and sharing with me, oh, it's got this and it's got that. And pretty soon he's ordering one. They have a sale, 25% off. Boom. Our solar power electric system is in the mail. And this is like a year later after I initially planted that seed of wisdom that I knew this would be a smart thing to do. Before I knew that there were going to be power outages in our community because of this. So this is just one example of womb alchemy, where that seed was planted, it gestated, it developed, the circumstances presented themselves, the time was ripe, and the situation developed in such a way that, and the financial situation happened too. Like one of my husband's big concerns was that that's a big investment, and we'd been working on that over the past period of time. And before he made the purchase, the day before the sale was happening, he was looking at our finances and saying, "Oh my goodness, look at this. We've saved just this last month, just the right amount to make this purchase." Great, let's do it. So it just can be that easy for things to move forward if we're just trusting. Like, I like to liken it to a pregnancy, where you're just trusting that that baby in your womb will know just the right time for that baby to be born. And so having that pleasurable moment of inspiration where the seed is planted, and then letting that gestation happen in its own time, whilst nourishing oneself and doing whatever is necessary to create a happy nest for that baby to be born in. So that process can be applied to anything that we're creating together in a partnership, in a relationship. And so those are just some of my reflections on womb alchemy in relationship. I hope this was helpful for you or inspiring to you in some way. And again, if you have reflections or experiences you'd like to share about womb alchemy in relationship, please feel free to share them either in whatever platform you are listening to this on, or join us on Facebook in the Womb Centered Healing Temple Facebook group, or on Mighty Networks in the group of the same name, the Womb Centered Healing Temple. All right, I look forward to sharing more with you soon. Take good care.